Welcome, and many thanks for tuning in for the launch of the fourth round of the Institutional Challenge Grant Competition. This is Kim DuMont, Senior Program Officer at the William T. Grant Foundation. I'm joined by our President, Adam Gamoran, and Laura Tach and Juliana Garcia, two Institutional Challenge Grant Fellows. Also on hand are Billy Hunter and Lenore Nair from our communications team. The focus of today's webinar is on the Institutional Challenge Grant MidCareer Fellows and building the capacity to produce and use research evidence. In part one of the webinar, we'll revisit the goals of the Institutional Challenge Grant. Laura and Juliana will then help us dig deep into the MidCareer Fellows' role to bolster the partnership, conduct the research, and use research to reduce inequality in youth outcomes. We will then pause for questions. In part two of the webinar, I will speak more about the award and application review process. We will then have time for another round of questions. Throughout the webinar, please send us your questions through GoToWebinar. Lastly, please know that the slides and recording from today's webinar will be posted within the next 2 weeks. Let's get started. First, a little background about the William T. Grant Foundation. The Foundation's mission is to support research to improve the lives of young people in the United States. In pursuit of this goal, we invest our research dollars in two focus areas. Our Use of Research Evidence initiative supports studies on strategies to improve the use of research evidence in policy and practice in ways that benefit youth. Our Reducing Inequality initiative supports studies about ways programs, policies, and practices can reduce inequality in outcomes among young people in the United States. Importantly, the Institutional Challenge Grant brings together these two focus areas. It facilitates research that yields knowledge that's useful to decision makers and research that's used in ways that improve outcomes for youth. But this is no easy task, and intention and resources are needed at an institutional level to make headway. The Institutional Challenge Grant therefore encourages research institutions to build sustained research practice partnerships with public agencies or nonprofit organizations, to have the partnerships pursue a joint research agenda to reduce inequality in youth outcomes, to create institutional change to value research practice partnerships and their work, and to develop both partners' capacity to collaborate and to produce and use high quality, relevant research. The fellows play an instrumental role in advancing all of these goals. But these efforts also require investments in the fellows' skills and knowledge. Before we hear from the two fellows with us today, let's review a few features of the Institutional Challenge Grant that will help us better understand their roles. The Foundation defines research practice partnerships as long-term, mutually beneficial collaborations that promote the production and use of rigorous and relevant research evidence. Partnerships adopt a long-term view, persist beyond a single project, involve relationships between institutions as well as individuals, and benefit both parties. A growing body of work suggests that partnerships help researchers develop an understanding of the local context, learn about the needs and questions of policymakers and practitioners, and provide insights that can lead to groundbreaking research. Research practice partnerships also benefit the public agency or nonprofit organization. They help policymakers and practitioners gain access to existing research, contribute to research agendas that's relevant to their local context, and receive assistance in their efforts to use the research evidence. For these reasons, partnerships are a promising strategy for producing and using research in impactful ways. Research practice partnerships involved in the Institutional Challenge Grant must pursue a research agenda to reduce inequality in youth outcomes. We contend that inequality on the basis of economic, racial, ethnic, and immigrant origins is pervasive, that evidence often exists about the causes and consequences of inequality, but the ways to reduce inequality are less well understood. A goal for the partnership's work is to increase the utility and strength of research evidence available to inform responses, and the fellows are key to this effort. The grant therefore includes funds for the equivalent of 2 one-year full-time fellows. It also requires a match of 1 full-time fellow for 1 year. Further, all fellows must be mid-career. These mid-career fellows are necessary to advance both the partnership and the research agenda. Fellows deepen and extend existing relationships and help to solidify the partnership between institutions. The research fellows conduct the research, and their mid-career status brings a set of skills, confidence, and expertise that benefits the research conducted. The policy or practice fellow helps to strengthen an agency's capacity to produce and use research evidence. And again, this fellow's mid-career status is an asset in these efforts. But the skills needed to be a good partner and conduct and use research require development and support. On the research side, researchers are often not trained to be effective partners or recognized for the time and effort required to do this work. On the nonprofit side, staff often work on short-term, soft money contracts, which limits opportunities to increase research capacity. Thus, the mid-career fellows play a critical role in the institutional challenge grant. Current grantees have identified and deployed fellows in different ways. Some have selected a single research fellow that stays for the duration of the grant. Others have identified a team of fellows, each working half-time for 1 year or more to carry out concurrent or sequential projects. Nearly all grantees have proposed a practice or policy fellow, and these fellows build the organization's capacity to produce and use research. To further unpack these experiences, I'm now going to turn the program over to Juliana, Garcia, and Laura Tach, who were selected as fellows for the very first institutional challenge grant, which was awarded to Cornell University and the Tompkins County's Cooperative Extension. Laura?
Hello, everyone. This is Laura Tach, and I am the research fellow at Cornell University. And Juliana, the practice fellow, and I are going to tell you a little bit about the origins of our project, just to situate you to our work, and then dig in a bit deeper to tell you about how our partnership works and our specific role as mid-career fellows. So the origins of our project really came out of a research practice collaboration. I was actually at a community meeting with the community partner PI, Anna Stan-Kraus, and she was just in passing telling me about what was happening in her work lately, and as part of their work conducting programming and home visiting for children in the child welfare system, she was telling me about a surge in local indicated child maltreatment cases that she and other social workers had been experiencing that was placing a really huge burden on local service providers and capacity. And in further talking, she told me many providers thought that this was related to the growing opioid epidemic that was affecting our local community as well as many others around the country. And that really struck my interest as a researcher and, of course, my concern as a community member, because I had seen at that point a lot of academic research talking about the growing opioid epidemic and its consequences for adult outcomes, such as adult mortality rates. But I hadn't seen a lot at that point about the consequences intergenerationally for children. And so although there was this strong local sense that what we were seeing was related to opioids, there wasn't a lot of broader quantitative empirical data that was being brought to bear on that question. And so that really gave rise to our Opioid and Family Life Project, which is designed to respond to increasing rates of opioid misuse and child maltreatment in low-income rural communities in New York and beyond. And as part of that work, we're using a mixed methods approach to understand the association between opioid misuse and child maltreatment, and also to identify promising interventions to help mitigate child maltreatment among families who are struggling with substance use disorders. We're also working to advance institutional change by providing funding and training for faculty to conduct scholarship in collaboration with practitioners, and building the capacity of practitioners in the community to use research and conduct high-quality evaluations. So let us tell you a little bit about how our team is structured. So I am on the left as a mid-career fellow at Cornell, and the PI on the university side is our dean, Rachel Dunnison, who's the dean of the College of Human Ecology at Cornell, and she plays a really critical role in that position as someone who has power and resources and a desire to enact the institutional change component for universities, which we'll talk a bit more about in a couple of slides. Juliana, I can turn it over to you to talk about the community partner side of the team.
Hi, Juliana Garcia here, she, her. So the Cornell Cooperative Extension side, we have the PI, Anna Steinkraus, who's my supervisor, and she is the program coordinator for our Family and Community Development Department within Cooperative Extension. And then I am on the fellow side of the practice, and under that we have a lot of MSW interns and undergrad interns who help us with this project as well as other projects we have going on. I think we can go to the next slide. Great. Yeah, so I'll just keep going, Laura, then I'll turn it back over to you. So I went to Cornell and got my BA in Industrial and Labor Relations. And I also went on to get my master's in social work. Like I said, I'm in the Family and Community Development Department and do a lot of work around parenting education. And my background is in social work, like I said, anti-racist work, intersectionality, and then innovative program delivery methods. So really trying to, keep up with what's happening and the needs in the community and responding to those needs. So I'll turn it over to you, Laura.
Sure. And so on the university MidCareer Fellow side, my PhD is in sociology and social policy, and I'm currently an associate professor of policy analysis and management with a privileged appointment in sociology. And my background is in poverty and social policy, as well as family sociology, and I use a mixed methods research approach in all of my work. There we go. Okay, so let us tell you a little bit about how we work together and how we've structured our partnership. So first thing that we have done is set up a series of monthly team meetings that are really crucial early on in our project, but also on an ongoing basis to facilitate shared decision-making between the research and community sides of the partnership, and also just to kind of build on trust and have ongoing dialogues among all of the team members. We alternate our locations between the university and the Cooperative Extension offices or other places in the community. In addition, we have a number of shared interns, program assistants, and postdocs, as Juliana alluded to when we described our team. And the key emphasis here is on the word shared for these positions, which are funded by a combination of the grant and also some matching funding from Cornell. So for example, we mainly say shared are things like our program assistant has worked not only on academic literature reviews, but also has helped in the Cooperative Extension offices with putting all of their program evaluation surveys on Kindles for the participants and working out the kinks in terms of evaluations in the community. Our postdoc has also not only worked on academic papers, but has also worked as a facilitator and educator in one of the parenting interventions at Cooperative Extension. We've also had a number of shared undergraduate and MSW interns who have worked on various aspects of the project over 2 years. And we really do take that shared component very seriously. Juliana, I can turn it over to you.
Yeah, so thinking about the various projects that we're doing, we're going to talk a little bit later about one of the projects, the opioid project work team that came out of our work together and is now across the CC association system in New York State. But yeah, we really tried to work together and remain in constant contact with each other, either through email. We have pretty frequent meetings that we attend monthly, as well as the shared project assistant or program assistant is incredibly helpful in making sure every week she keeps us updated and we have that connection so that we're very much on the same page about any projects we may have and how we want to move those forward with our various lenses that we're looking through for our work. And then as well as the community building activities, it's been incredibly helpful to have the research side in thinking about how to strengthen the activities we're doing in the community and to evaluate those activities to, you know, see if we can achieve better outcomes and things like that. So yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. What do you think, Laura?
Yeah.
Great. So I'll just keep going. So for the fellows time, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, but the grants fund 50% of the salary for 2 years. So the way that it works for us is I'm staying on for the course of this project, and Laura, you are as well. I know Kim had said it works differently for different grant awardees, but yeah, that's how we're doing it. We found that the continuity really helps with keeping the projects with that forward momentum and just the, you know, the background knowledge of everything that's happening or has happened with the projects over time. And then at CCE, just in general, all of our positions are funded by contracts. So this has been incredibly helpful. And like I said, keeping that continuity in programming, because you can really, we can show up to work one day and someone isn't there because they lost their funding, right? So that's pretty difficult when you're thinking about keeping programming going, right? If you lose someone who has all that knowledge. So this grant has been incredibly helpful in helping us establish that on our side. And I'll turn it over to you, Laura.
Yeah, and then on the university side, the way faculty appointments are structured at Cornell are they're 50% research and 50% teaching, all hard money. So really the release comes from course releases for the teaching side, in addition to summer salary to help support the MidCareer Fellow on the university side. And moving to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about the ways in which we're working to build capacity of the MidCareer Fellows and the other members of the team in a couple of different ways. The first is through a bunch of activities that are really deliberately working to blur the lines between research and practice. And we have a number of examples of kind of an iterative process that involves ongoing conversations and input between the two sides. Juliana, did you want to talk about the culturally competent parenting example of that?
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the projects that I've been working on is doing a program review of various programs, parenting education programs that are out there too, Jen. That means including the parent and the child programs. And something that I had found was that there weren't a whole lot of programs available that had a culturally sensitive lens or were written by, you know, people of color. And so I saw that as a major gap, and that was something that we talked about together, like how do we figure out how to find who's doing this parenting? Because I know, like, on the ground, like grassroots, there are a lot of, like, quote unquote parenting educators out there, right, who may not have the formal training, but they work in these communities. And they're doing this parenting education for Black and Brown families, Indigenous families, but they don't have that, like, evidence-based, right, criteria. I know you can't see me, but I'm, like, making the air quotes, right? They don't have that criteria behind their programming. And so in thinking about it through, like, the lens that I'm approaching it, right, with, like, anti-racist work and intersectionality and all that, it's like, who has access to go get a PhD, right? Like, and so thinking about all those things and how do we support through this grant and the programming that we're doing, like boosting up those aspects of the work. So we've made contact with a few parents and educators who are working in Black and Brown communities and helping get them the tools that they need to be able to evaluate their programs, right? So that if they want to be able to submit grants for it, whatever else, they have all the tools necessary. And that's been really amazing to be able to come to the research side of our project and ask them, and it was really like, okay, how do we do this? Let's hit the ground running. And so, yeah, I think the trainings that I've been able to go through and thinking of the building capacity, right? The trainings I've been able to attend that help me hone in on that research side, it allows me to think about these questions through that research lens and be able to bring it to the other side of our work and have these really, really great discussions about how to move the work forward.
Yeah, and in addition to these kind of activities that are blurring the research practice line, we've also been involved in a number of joint data collection efforts. A couple of examples of those include we've worked with a cooperative extension to develop electronic surveys that can be used on tablets for real-time data input by participants so that the program leaders can see in real time the evening after a session or the day after a session how things went, and they can also then quickly report that information to the judge, to the county welfare offices, and the other relevant stakeholders that are involved in that we're involved with. And so that has really helped increase the capacity of the organization and the area as a whole. We've also had a lot of really collaborative engagement around qualitative research, developing the interview protocols that we researchers have fielded, but we got a lot of input from our community partners about what the relevant questions to ask are, how to ask the questions, how to be sensitive and responsive in the way that the data are used on the back end as well. As Juliana mentioned, we've also been fortunate to be able to attend a number of different types of professional development workshops that have helped to build our capacity as well. For example, one was the Ideas Impact Framework training at Harvard, and we've also had some of our researchers, including myself, do some of the trainings that our educators and facilitators on the community partnership side go through as a matter of course as well. So we've tried to balance that on both sides of the partnership. And then finally, we've also had a chance, as our work has been going on, to present our work and share it at both researcher and practitioner-oriented conferences. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of learning that goes on in those settings in terms of how to present the work, what's relevant to the different audiences as well. We can move to the final slide. And so, of course, a big piece, we can move to the institutional change, but yeah. Of course, a big piece of the grant is an institutional change component, meaning that how do we make sure that the gains that we're producing through this grant are going to be able to endure beyond this particular project and this particular team of people. And so we've been very intentional about that on both the university and the community side of the grant. On the Cornell side, our PI, Rachel Dunnison, who is also our dean, has made our college a pilot college in this Engaged Cornell initiative, which means that we have developed a position in the university or in the college structure that is specifically for public engagement, and serves as a point person for that, for questions and facilitating that kind of work in the college. And the idea is to expand successful approaches from our college out to all of the colleges in the university. She's also devoted some funding for community engaged faculty pilot grants that partner with community-based organizations around the state. And she's also provided funding for summer grant research and other research opportunities for both undergraduate and graduate students to get involved in these projects and to promote student involvement.
And then on the cooperative extension side, so we are a nonprofit. That's the way the extension system works in New York State. It's connected to the university, but each one within the county is its own nonprofit. And so that comes with its own hardships, right? Financially, a lot of people think we're tied to Cornell with money, but we're not. So for example, like digitizing our program, the data collection there, that's like a pretty big deal for us, right? because it's all paper and pen. And if you lose surveys, then you lose the surveys, right? That's not like a really great way to operate. So it's been incredibly helpful to have the program assistant and the research side be able to help us get that over to digital so that, you know, it's easy to collect data, it's easy to evaluate the data and all that. We also have been able to make templates for our data reports. So instead of, these are things, right, that it's like, oh man, I wish we had been doing this all the time. But being able to have that is so incredibly important so that if some of us leave, right, the next people who come in have everything ready to go. The program review, I had talked a little bit about that. The parenting program review, we're hoping to finish that up and be able to share it out across the CC system, as well as just having it on our website so that we, you know, anyone who wants to look for parenting education programs at R2Gen or anything like that can come and search for that. I think I mentioned the opioid program work team a little bit earlier, but that has come out of this partnership, and that is across the CCE system as a whole. And so we have conferences for that, which is really amazing to see this come up out of the ground. And that's being held by the Cooperative Extension on campus, and they're coordinating with both of the research and the practice side of this project. They're coordinating with us how to reach out to the other associations and inform people about what's going on around the opioid epidemic, and getting information from the other associations on what we can be doing better to respond to the opioid epidemic. As well as the other thing that we're doing is the regular parenting email listserv. So we're able to be in regular contact with the parents who come through our parenting education program, instead of, you know, they take our 8-week class and then we don't see them again. We've been able to build up a system to where we are checking in with them via newsletter and other ways. So yeah, I think that's all I got.
Great. Thank you both so much for sharing your experiences and insights as fellows. Before we move on to discuss the specifics of the award and application and review process, let's pause and take a few questions. Adam?
Yes, so I'd like to encourage participants to type their questions into the question box. We've got a few questions which are for you, Kim DuMont, but I invite people to also put questions for Laura Tach and Juliana Garcia. Kim, there have been a number of questions about who is eligible to be a fellow. For example, I know you're going to talk to the 8 to 20 years post-PhD for the research fellow, but one person asked whether a PhD is required of the fellow coming from the public partnership. Now, we saw, of course, that Juliana's degree is an MSW. So could you talk more about eligibility requirements for the public partnership fellow?
Sure. So the partnership, the public or policy fellow is not required to have a PhD. Some understanding of research may be helpful, but this is also an area where additional knowledge and skills can be developed. Eligibility for the policy or practice fellow parallels for the research fellow. You have to have 8 to 20 years of cumulative experience in your role. You can learn more about this at the application guide, and Billy has posted that as a handout for you to look at that. But it's 8 to 20 years of cumulative experience in a role or similar role.
Thank you. And Kim, there's a question on the board about the position of think tanks. Now, I know that only universities are eligible to apply for the Institutional Challenge Grant with a nonprofit or public agency partner, but could fellows come from a think tank?
Absolutely. So in the award, it's up to the partners to decide whether they want to elect or select fellows from within their own institution, or to bring in fellows from another institution, or to have some combination of those two. So folks who work in think tanks or other research centers would be eligible to be a fellow.
Thank you. So COVID-19 is going to make it tougher to get commitment from public agencies ray matching. But I would like to emphasize that it is the university that is required to participate in the match, not typically the public agency. Perhaps Laura Tach, you could talk about what Cornell University is contributing to this institutional partnership. Tangible.
Yes, right. Yeah. So in addition to the course release and summer salary that is provided by the grant, Cornell is providing a course release and a month of summer salary as kind of a university match for 1 year for me for the MidCareer Fellow at the university side. In addition, Cornell has provided several other types of in-kind support for the grant through partial support of a postdoc, a PhD student, and some undergraduate summer internships as well. Some of that comes from existing sources of funding that I or other members of the team have applied for and received for this particular grant. And so they've been able to dedicate some of their resources to support the grant in that way as well.
Thank you. And Juliana, I have a two-part question. The first part is for me and the second part is for you. So the first part is it expected that the lead in the proposal will be the university? And the answer to that is yes. Universities must be the lead agency in the proposal because a big part of the purpose of this grant is to encourage universities to value and support partnership-oriented research on the part of their faculty. But the second part then is, what then is the role of the public agency or nonprofit partner? Juliana, could you talk a little bit about the role of your agency in this grant, perhaps in co-determining the research question, perhaps in building capacity, or other areas that you think will help this questioner?
Yeah, so I think our role has really been, we're connected with the community, right? Because we're on the ground, we're working in the community. And so we're able to see what the community needs are and then also process what research is coming out of the university and seeing how that's landing in the community. Sometimes, like, not the researchers we're working with specifically, right? But in general, like, research papers, things will come out and it's great, but no one really understands what it's talking about, right? And so that's something that we've been trying to work with, like, okay, how do we convey this in a way that the public understands, right? A layperson can understand, and it's not like research jargon, because it's a lot of really helpful stuff. So a lot of the briefs that we've been able to create together is really like digestible, right? You can hand it over to the judge who's working in family treatment court, and it's a one-pager. So thinking about, like, on the ground, when you're in the weeds in practice, right? Like, what's the best way to get this information to people and to collect those needs assessments that are happening to get it back to the research side so that they're informed, of what to be studying. Does that answer the question?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple more questions I want to get in before we move on. First, may research focus on racial inequalities exacerbated due to COVID-19? The answer to that is absolutely yes. We are very concerned about racial inequalities that are showing themselves in stark light due to the pandemic, and a focus on the exacerbation of these inequalities would be most welcome in your research agendas. But I want to emphasize that the focus is on inequality in youth outcomes. And second, that ultimately the focus is on what strategies can institutions take to respond to those inequalities. So the research should move beyond documenting the extent and sources of inequality to identifying ways to respond to inequality. And then I also wanted to, let's see, a question for Laura and perhaps for Juliana as well. One of our questioners would like to know, what is the sustainability structure related to the program at Cornell? How are you going to keep this going after the 3 years or hopefully 5 years of the grants have ended?
Well, we're hoping a couple of things. One, we're hoping that through the capacity that has been built on both of our ends. One, like for example, in just creating templates for easily digestible research projects, creating a website where it's easy to post information for people to receive, and creating a system of funding for undergraduate research and pilot projects. We're hoping that we can not only sustain the work that we're doing on our specific research question, but also build the capacity of other faculty, first in our college and then hopefully throughout the university. So using this really as a test case and showing the positive impacts that it can have in our project, in our college, and then in our university. So we're fortunate to have a dean who is the PI, who is committed to this endeavor, not only for the specific grant, but as part of her strategic mission for the college as a whole. And I think that has been extremely helpful for us in thinking about how to sustain it in the longer term.
Thank you. Look, Juliana, do you want to add?
No, I think she pretty much summed it up for us.
Great. And one last question. Someone asked whether someone from Africa may apply, and I'm just thrilled to have people participating in this webinar from all around the world. It's very exciting to build this community of researchers and practitioners working together to build capacity. The funds from the William T. Grant Foundation may go to someone outside the United States, but the research focus must be on youth in the United States. So for example, one of the institutional challenge grants of 2019 was won by the University of Toronto with a focus on education of youth in Puerto Rico. So if someone outside the US were applying for the grant in partnership with an organization working with US young people and improving or reducing inequality among US young people, that would be eligible. There's no restrictions on where the applicant is from, but there is a restriction on where the youth who are targeted for inequality reduction is from. Okay, well, we'll have one more chance for asking questions at the end of the webinar, but for now, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim DuMont to tell everyone how to apply and win this grant.
Great, thank you, Adam, Laura, and Juliana. That was really helpful. And as Adam said, we'll have another opportunity to come back and ask questions. Let's now turn our attention to the award, the application, and the review process. The Institutional Challenge Grant provides $650,000 over 3 years with the possibility of a 2-year funded renewal to solidify the partnership and institutional change. The monies within the grant map very closely to the goals of the program. Applicants can allot up to 9 months to support joint planning to refine activities such as selecting the fellows and finalizing partnerships agreement. There are also funds for the partnership to conduct research to reduce inequality in youth outcomes. And as stated earlier, the award includes funding for the equivalent of 1 full-time MidCareer Fellow per year for 2 years. There are also resources to support activities that develop both partners' capacities, as we heard about today, and there is an indirect cost allowance of up to 15% of the total direct costs. All of these costs and the indirect allowance are included in the $650,000 total. In addition to the funding from the foundation, the research institution must contribute the equivalent of 1 full-time fellow for 1 year, and this can be paid through in-kind contributions like course buyouts or by other grant funding. As you develop your application, it may be helpful to keep in mind the foundation's aspirations for the award. At the end of 5 years, 3 years for the initial grant and 2 years for a renewal if it's approved, we expect the research institution will have established a set of strategies that facilitate sustained research collaborations with a public agency or nonprofit organization. The public agency or nonprofit has increased its capacity to use research evidence, and I think we had a very nice illustration of what this might look like today. Participating researchers have improved their partnership skills, as we heard Laura talk about, And the research generated has been used in decision-making and is likely to lead to improved outcomes for youth. This year's institutional challenge grant applications are due on September 10th. The full proposal includes all agreements and statements of support. This is a big lift, so it's good to start early. There are no letters of inquiry for this competition. You move directly to the full proposal. Once submitted, senior staff review for the 4-page structured abstract that's part of the application. The abstract is a critical component of the application, and at this stage in the process, other materials are only reviewed as needed. So I encourage you to spend a bit of time making sure that your abstract reflects the full richness of your application. Applications that fit with the foundation's interests and have been responsive to the call for proposal are then moved on to the selection committee for further review. And each proposal that's moved forward is assigned to 2 committee members who conduct in-depth reviews of the entire proposal. These reviews are then shared with the applicant. In addition, the proposals that receive the highest rankings are deliberated in a selection committee meeting. These deliberations again rely heavily on the structured abstracts, as it's not possible for every committee member to read every proposal. The selection committee then selects 3 to 4 finalist partnerships, and those finalists provide a written response to reviewers' feedback, and the partners attend an in-person interview at the foundation. At least one partnership is then recommended for an award. The selection committee is comprised of individuals who have held a variety of professional roles, including university presidents, provosts, center directors, leaders of state and local agencies, and researchers and practitioners who are actively engaged in partnerships. They also represent a diverse range of interests, including education, mental health, child welfare, justice, and housing. They vary in their experiences working in and with public and private research institutions. They are all accomplished and excited and supportive group of individuals. The program for the 2020-2021 competition remains unchanged. We are keeping our focus on university-based research institutes, schools, or centers, are committed to supporting partnerships to pursue research agendas about reducing inequality, and continue to encourage institutional change to value these efforts. As you heard today, mid-career fellows and capacity building are essential for meeting these goals. We also continue to encourage proposals from teams with persons of color in leadership roles, either as the project's principal investigator from the university or as the lead from the public agency or nonprofit organization. We welcome partnerships across a range of domains, including child welfare, mental health, housing, justice, education, and others. And resubmissions are welcome. We encourage you to use the reviews you may have received in a prior year to strengthen your proposal. As you have heard today, the success of the partnership will depend in part on the capacity of both partners to collaborate, produce, and use high-quality research. So given today's conversation, I want to highlight a few items concerning the fellows and capacity building efforts that will be considered when evaluating your proposal. Applicants should include a rubric for selecting fellows that have the requisite skills to carry out the proposed work. The plan for the research fellows must significantly extend their skills to be an effective partner. The plan to increase public agency or nonprofits' use of research and decision-making must be feasible. And all fellows must be mid-career, which we have said the specifics of which are outlined in the application guide. This includes 8 to 20 years since a doctoral degree or completion of residency for research fellows, and 8 to 20 years of cumulative experience in a current role for the policy or practice fellow. For a more detailed and complete listing of the selection criteria and eligibility requirements, please refer to the application guide. We recognize that the application is demanding and have developed a number of resources to assist with this process. I encourage you to visit the Foundation's website and to read and reread the application guide, to look at the resources that we've developed specifically for this program, such as prior webinars and staff writing. I want to call out here that last year's webinar focused on different strategies to foster institutional change to better value research practice partnerships. I also want to call out your attention to an area of our website that's devoted to research practice partnership. This includes tools, work samples from actual partnerships in different policy areas, how they communicate with each other, the different position descriptions, and it's a very rich resource that may serve you well as you develop your application. Finally, you may be interested in learning more about the partnerships that have been funded to date, and we have pulled written descriptions that describe the proposed research, plans for institutional change, and a little bit about each partner. These descriptions now live in a separate document on our website, and Billy has again posted these as part of this webinar for you to access quite easily. I want to call out that there are 6 awards were made during the first 3 years of the competition. Please note that the research partners include public and private institutions from different geographic regions. And although not presented here, I do want to also note that the applicants have been, the applications have come from different colleges and departments within those institutions, including economics, public health, education, and human ecology. Likewise, the public and nonprofit partners include community organizations, school districts, and 2 regional agencies. We also welcome city and state agencies as public partners. You may be wondering how we were able to make 6 awards in 3 years if our intent is to make 1 award a year. Due to the generosity of the Spencer Foundation and the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, we were able to make 1 additional award in 2018 and 2 additional awards in 2019. We intend to award at least 1 grant in future years. I will now open it back up for additional questions, either from what you're now reflecting on in the first part of the webinar, or specific questions about the application and the review process. Adam?
Kim, we've got a question that often comes up. Can one university submit multiple applications?
Sure. So universities are welcome to submit multiple applications. You must recognize that if the intent is to make 1 award, you will be competing against each other, but that's your prerogative.
Thank you. And Kim, would an eligible partnership include a university and a community college, where the community college is the community partner?
Yes, we have been taking this question a bit, and Adam and I have actually talked about it. And if there's a clear plan for reducing inequality that's being experienced or reported by the community colleges and working with the university to address those challenges, we would welcome that.
Thank you. I am answering a few of the questions online that get can get pretty simple answers. But here's one from someone who applied in the past. And this person's question is, how can I obtain reviews from a prior application?
So hopefully you received reviews for a prior application when we passed along our decision letter. If not, please feel free to send me an email after this call and we'll make sure that you get them.
Thank you. There's a bunch of questions that I think you answered by explaining how we managed to fund multiple 6 partnerships over 3 years when we're funding 1 a year, so I don't need to ask that. Will there be opportunities for this grant beyond round 4?
When our board approved the initiative, we had a commitment to at least do 5 years. So I would say, yes, there will definitely be a 5th year. I don't know if you want to add anything, Adam?
Yeah, I would add that we consider this to be a highly successful program and have every intention of proposing to continue it beyond the 5 years. But what we have right now is a commitment to fund it in year 4 and in year 5. Let's see.
I'd like to offer one reflection, if that's okay. Kind of breaking with script here, which is something that Laura and Juliana described, which I think might be a useful frame for applicants as they think about the capacity building activities and who might do well in the fellows role, is this idea of blurring the lines between research and policy practice. And often we think about doing research and handing off the results or posting them. Sometimes we think about folks in a community organization or a public agency using findings that were previously generated. But this notion of coming together to do work in partnership is a nice way to think about it, and what we really hope that universities will value and appreciate the benefit of taking that approach.
Thanks, Kim. And there's a great question about whether partnerships applying for this award need to be brand new or can be pre-existing. And I'd love, Kim, for you to talk about the right point in a partnership's development for applying for this award, and then perhaps to ask Laura and Juliana to comment on where the Cornell CCE partnership was before the award, why this was the right time for them to apply, and how the partnership has developed over time.
Sure. So we have received applications and funded partnerships at different stages of their development or maturity. The selection committee for partnerships that are more nascent or newer in their connection, they have to be convinced that the partnership will persist beyond the single research project. And so that requires co-developing a strong application together and presenting a plan for how you will work together and the opportunities for the proposed partnership to sustain. On the other hand, we've also received proposals, and I think Northwestern might be a good example of someone we funded this year, that were more mature in their development and had built a strong foundation. And their challenge was to convince the selection committee of how the institutional challenge grant would add value to the partnership that's been established, the work they're trying to do, and the institutional change that they have were trying to promote. And so there the burden was quite a bit different than a newer partnership. I'll turn it over to Laura or Juliana if you want to talk about at what point you felt you were ready to apply and how that's benefited or detracted from your work.
Yeah, I can go first, and then Juliana, you can jump in if you'd like to add on to what I say. So one thing that is relevant for our partnership is that unlike other universities that have cooperative extension systems that are kind of directly embedded within the university, as Juliana mentioned, in New York State, every county has its own independent nonprofit organization that is a county extension association, and they receive some limited funding from the state, but not any funding directly from Cornell. So that we really felt there was a need to build up and to institutionalize the connections between campus and the county association offices, starting with Tompkins, which is our local community where Cornell is located, and then hopefully extending beyond that in a variety of ways. And so we knew each other and knew of each other, as indicated by the start of this project, which came from a conversation after a community meeting that both the community PI and I were at, but we hadn't engaged directly in any collaborative research before. And so there was kind of maybe the origins and the desire, but this grant really propelled us forward, even just the process of writing the grant and thinking through it together and having those conversations really propelled our partnership forward in a concrete way that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Juliana?
I don't think so, because I was hired on as a result of this, so I don't have too much information about what happened before. So I think Laura covered it.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everyone. Adam, were you done? Or?
Yeah, I want to put in one more question, and then you can answer it and then wrap up, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
So the last question that we have time for is there a specific focus or domain of the work that the organization is engaged in? For example, is work related to STEM valued? Is there a specific content area that the Institutional Challenge Grant applicants would be best poised to pursue?
That's a great question, and we really value all of the good ideas that come from the field, and therefore don't decide ahead of time that we're just going to look at STEM or a particular area, but instead welcome a range of challenges and the responses that the partnerships might propose across different policy areas, whether it's in education, whether it's in justice, whether it's in the community, whether it's in housing, and so on. We are looking for good ideas, bold strategies for institutional change, partnerships that may have already found their path together, and those that are forging it in new ways. So we welcome a range of different ideas and from different problem spaces. So I'd like to wrap up now and thank all of you for joining us today. As you can see, we remain very excited about the possibility that the Institutional Challenge Grant Program offers, and we hope to receive your good ideas in the form of applications in September. I encourage you to use prior grantees and those descriptions as a starting point for the ideas that you propose to us, and to both build on those and introduce new ways of thinking about this challenge. Thanks very much. Have a good day.